Good morning, Trumptopia, a special segment of the almost daily ZenCast, hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zebo. Hello and namaste, friends. Welcome to another episode of Good Morning Trumptopia. It's 3:06 p.m. on a lovely Thursday afternoon, this April 16th, not 26th, April 16th of the year 2020. I forgot that I left some windows open, so if there's unusual noises in the background, please forgive me. That's my bad. So, breaking, just as I was about to turn off the TV, because when I turned it on to check and grab a quick bite to eat, everybody was on commercial. And I shit you not, I flipped through every channel that I normally cruise through that shows news, and they were either showing weird things, like the BBC was talking about it said on the guide that it was going to talk about Japanese motorcycle racing, but they were talking about other things that I didn't understand. I'm like, I had no idea what it was, and I didn't seem to be anything about Japanese Olympic bicycle racing or motorcycle racing. I wasn't clear. It was either motorcycle racing or Olympic bicycle racing, and the reason I say that I'm not sure is because I can't quite remember which phrasing they used, whether they said bike or motorcycle or cycle. I think they might have just said cycle racing. And my brain might have tried to make it look like motorcycle racing at first, because that's what I kind of wanted it to be, with robots. Kind of like that recent robot lady that's a battle drone movie, Alita Battle Angel, I believe. I finally caught up with that. And I may or may not have already done an irrelevant movie review recording when I talk about that. And I might have to do a different one anyways. But I digress. I was flipping through the channels. Everybody was on commercial break for forever. It felt like the longest, I'm stuck on commercial break. And when they came back, everyone was, all four channels, 4 or 5 channels, were on the White House press conference room wide shot. And the only one that I caught an intelligible, I understood what it was saying, cryon sort of, breaking news thingy that made sense to me was that apparently whenever he came up on the dais to talk, Trump was going to announce a 3-phase plan. Now, sometimes in the recent days and now becoming weeks of Trump doing daily COVID-19 coronavirus, quote, his words, Chinese virus, if not outright racist, at least politically incorrect enough to be like, come on, dude, we don't need that kind of passive-aggressive bullshit. But I digress. These press conferences on the daily, sometimes he will just say they'll start soon and make it sound like it's going to be 2 and he won't go on to 3:30 or something. I'm like, just what is going on? So much waiting. And of course, a lot of it is the media. They all dramify it. So does, from Fox News to BBC to MSNBC to CNN. I've heard all the conspiracy theories. I don't need to be preached on about that. In fact, I've got some opinions of my own about that whole cloud of stuff. And if that interests you, please, by all means, jump around and listen to various episodes. You will eventually catch threads of things that connect to conspiracy theory. 1 or 2 episodes out there are overtly addressed to the conspiracy theory community, I believe. If not in their title, in their content. But I digress. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. And oftentimes I sort of say that in some interjection, and then 20 minutes later I'm like, well, that got out of control. But not today, friends. Today, I just wanted to touch base with you guys about Trumptopia. We are definitely in a very strange place. In the last week, the person who currently occupies the office of the President of the United States of America, which, for those of you who may be wondering, it is my humble opinion that most of them started out like normal, regular, plain old, ordinary human beings with good intentions and probably a bad habit or two and some skeletons in their closet. But ultimately, the pressures of the system and the hidden and dark monies and dark powers that are exchanged, and on top of that, the spiritual pressure, I believe, that is being worked with, used against, by those that understand that, ultimately lead to most, and I don't want to paint with too broad of a picture, but most politicians acting out of conformity to party line or believing in an ideological construct that maybe they at one point rationally thought they questioned thoroughly, but maybe didn't always, or haven't truly. And that ultimately, like I've said before, and I'm sure I'll say again, you don't need a conspiracy theory more complicated than ego and power and money, right? Like, just ego and greed, to keep it nice and simple. That's enough to get people to do crazy things, whether it's a big, huge, overt conspiracy or a whole circus of circumstantial confluence of events. But I digress. After sitting back, and I've commented on and off mostly about conspiracy theory about COVID, there's definitely one that you should check out, which I hope to revisit soon and update and polish and tighten up. By the title, an episode, called Pick a Lane. Like that one, if you're interested about my deep conspiracy theories, get in on that. Go check that out. But now I want to comment on where I think we really actually factually are as a nation. Because, I don't know, maybe that's a valid thing to discuss and share opinions about. And I think I've tried to avoid rushing to judgment. Always and forever, friends, no matter what you hear me saying or talking about on this podcast, assuming the best and that the platform upholds its guarantee on its end that there isn't any kind of deep fake audio being interjected in places, I stand by what I've said. And if anyone thinks I've said something truly crazy, outrageously offensive, and they want to ask me about it, by all means, ask me about it in the comments. But I humbly believe it is, in my humble opinion, I think a very easily discernible and verifiable confluence of facts that lead to an objective conclusion that as a nation, independent of personal opinion about the yellow-haired, blue-eyed, orange-skinned, silly old man in office, I'm allowed to say that, right? I do believe he's a silly old guy. And I'm sure to soon become my own version of my own silly old kind of guy, but I don't think I'll be in any kind of position of great power. This guy, it is my humble opinion, is threading the fine middle ground, plausible deniability path where, on purpose, I think he's behaved in such a way that the rational argument that he did it on purpose and or he did it by accident and or he did his best and it turned out the way it is and he had a lot of opposition all seem plausible according to an individual's pre-existing political bias, right? That the scariest thing, and I've said this before, forgive me for saying it again now, if you're a longtime listener, But the scariest thing about this human individual, presuming he isn't an Anunnaki lizard waiting to tear for the perfect moment to like rip off his human face skin mask and go, I am Anunnaki and I will eat you. You know, like, is that going to happen? I don't think so. But believe it or not, that both as a generic proposition about all political puppets and as a specific one about Trump is out there. I don't want to guarantee it because I could be wrong, right? It might have been deleted. But I swear I've seen that. Both prior to Trump being in office to about other presidents at probably at any, you know, like deep sort of believer exaggeration, all presidents. And I am not pretending or in any way, shape, or form endorsing that. I'm just acknowledging it exists. I'm not saying I believe that. To come back on point, what I am saying is I think whether you have a virtuous and sincere and earnest person, like many people believe Bernie Sanders to be, or like some hitherto undiscovered political genius that we've yet to be introduced to, or someone who's obviously flawed, because there's no arguing that he is perfection, right? And I don't know how they do the mental gymnastics to buy into this, but people out there who believe instantly when they heard anyone reporting that Donald Trump is a messiah, they just, I don't know what to say about that. That won't sound belittling, but in part because I really, really can't find that idea in any way, shape, or form logically consistent with what I understand, you know, deep mystical teachings about what a messiah is and does to be. But bless their hearts, there is free will. You're allowed to believe whatever the hell you want. If you want to believe that Donald Trump is a clone of someone else named Donald Trump, or a robot, or a talking lizard with a rubber face mask, no one can stop you. Here's what I believe, to get back on point. I believe, and it is my free right, my free speech, yes, even in this current setting of this place we so lovingly call America, to say, and the world at large, right? Like the internet, does it belong to one country? I'm saying this on the internet. Like, people around the planet are listening. Shout out to people around the planet. I believe that whether, or like I was saying, whether you have a truly virtuous political genius or charming individual, you know, like a Gavin Newsom for the progressives, or a Cuomo for the East Coast's middle of the roaders, or I don't know who to pick from the closer to the alt-right, and I don't really want to because anybody over there on that end of the spectrum is too comfortable with some really controversial tendencies that express themselves in that extreme right direction for me to even take seriously. But I'm sure somebody's getting groomed as the next poster child of the extreme alt-right. Am I wrong? Maybe. Am I correct? I wouldn't be surprised. My point is, whoever they are, however they might start out, I humbly submit to you that with the problem, the real factual problem, the real, may I submit for your consideration, spiritual problem of this multifaceted thing we call ego, and the many tools brought about by this multifaceted phenomena we call greed, you don't really need a more complicated, monolithic, hidden, secretive, human organizational attempt to do bad things. Plenty of bad things will happen around those centers of power because we forget, we ignore. Maybe, just maybe, we've been radically conditioned to neglect and ignore the simple fact that power corrupts, that greed is unhealthy and toxic for the mind, that there's reasons why we have legends and attribute almost to them as demons or gods these things called greed and avarice, mammon. There's a passage in the Bible right up there next to my favorite one that I was talking about earlier in a recent episode that says you cannot be a servant of two masters. It's where we get the delightful title for the once very commonly, world famously, easily recognized reference, stage play, Servant of Two Masters. Not so commonly popular, recognized commonly. Wow, I butchered that. Edit that out in post. That play is not so popularly, commonly recognized these days, but the theater nerds out there might be getting a kick out of it, one way or the other. And in the Bible, it says you cannot serve two masters. Something, I don't remember the phrasing, and therefore something, I don't remember the phrasing, you will not be able to. I'm butchering my interpretation of it, but I am getting to a part that's really hardcore. You can't serve God and mammon. Like, what the hell is mammon? Interesting question. I posit to you, dear friends, that despite all of this discouragement, this vilification, this ostrification, this vilifying, minimalizing, kicking away, throwing out with the baby, of the baby with the bathwater, of spiritual energy, the dark and the light, the yin and the yang, frequency, etc., all the hippie new age nut job woo-woo nonsense, that, lo and behold, when you do your research, you find out has its origins in the very deep roots of every world organized religion. Things that make you go, with 3 of those emojis. You can come full circle and think, maybe, just maybe, you don't need robots or deep state or, it'll happen. Bad things will happen because people will get together and think bad thoughts and do bad things for the love, power, and greed. Greed and money. Greed and ego. For being slave to ego, which arguably might very well be embodied in some transdimensional consciousness vessel of non-material form. Like, ego might not literally bite you in the ass, but karma is karma. It's a thing that happens, and we just don't always see it clearly, given lack of complete and total context. So if we posit all that and think about it and contemplate it for a hot minute, where do we get? As I was saying to a dear friend of mine recently in a private conversation, one must, independent of spiritual labels or religious labels or even political labels. It's one thing, I don't agree with everything any politician says. I don't agree with everything Nancy Pelosi has ever said. But one thing I do agree with Nancy Pelosi very much strongly, is horribly constructed sentence. I apologize. Something that I very strongly agree with Nancy Pelosi about is praying for the president. Not in a condescending way, not in an asking for him to do what I want or I think I need kind of way. Therein lies the ego traps of ego, right? Because ego is a savvy, clever foil, villain, antithesis, and has laid ego traps everywhere, abundantly, for all of us, every single last one. Do I speak of ego as if it were the devil? Maybe, perhaps. Do I believe in the devil? Not in the way that your average Bible-thumping Christian would interpret or think is true for themselves. No. I think it is here, it is now, we make it for ourselves. Ego works within us now to set up horrible conditions for ourselves, for each other, for people we don't even know, vis-a-vis the consequences of the network of our actions. But there are ways we can counterbalance it. And as I was rambling before about not too long ago, I firmly believe that right now, whether you agree with me or not about how this confluence of events came about, it cannot be denied that sitting here, listening to the sound of my voice, you have the opportunity to do lots of things. Watch tons of movies, play a shit ton of video games, be with your family, develop a business plan for new businesses you're going to launch once everything gets back to normal, etc. And one of those things, can, should, would, might very well be, why shouldn't it be, one of those things that we all can pitch in and do together remotely is simply healing, spiritual healing, vis-a-vis whatever tradition you think, you believe authentically works for you without causing harm to yourself or anyone else. And I don't mean avoid the doctors, don't believe in medicine kind of spiritual healing. That's nonsense. I've never been a separatist. I've never understood why people presume that there must be a separation of church and science. Now, church and state, I understand the arguments for and against. Totally get why some people want their state to be more under the purview of their preferred, spiritual, moral, ethical, religious, mental construct guidelines. It makes you feel good, right? Like when it's my group has some deep relationship to those in charge and has some say on what is okay and what is not okay in the world according to the rule of law. There's problems with that. There's also problems with an absolute separation of church and state, especially in as much as when things like what's going on now happen. Oh man, I ever so lightly hit on this in a previous segment. I meant to do this is a deep dive worthy topic, right? But like separation of church and state, I under normal instances always 100% applauded that idea in any nation, right? In any setting, like let the churches be the churches. Let there be a separation of church and state. Except I was a weirdo. They take in so much money, even the smallest ones. I thought there should be a reasonable, for the good of the benefit of all and the well-being of the worst of the poorest of the poor, etc. Because every religion claims to be an organization willing to do work in service to and of, in the name of God, those who are, quote, the lowest of the low, the poorest of the poor, hungriest of the hungry, the most homeless of the most homeless. Am I wrong? Am I crazy to think that that's supposed to be not a value theoretically, but a practice, an active, engaged in activity? You don't just throw some money at some charity every once in a while, or sell cookies every once in a while, or whatever. You get out there and you tangibly make sure that hungry people get fed. And there's all this rugged individualism in America, especially over there in the Trumpopian quadrants, and the pre-Trumpopian alt-right, quadrant of the political demography chart. There's been a lot of this rugged individualism. You got to make it for yourself. You don't need to rely on charity, and therefore, if you want to do charity, you got to do it yourself or give yourself. It's like, okay, but how many people who subscribe to that do a lot of hands-on charity? And how many people where does this Venn diagram end up looking like? What? Where? Is where the right? No. What does this Venn diagram end up looking like? The number of people who self-identify as Trump supporters, Christians, and who actively, ongoingly, more than just occasionally, do something directly and personally that has to do with going out and feeding the homeless and finding them a place to live, not shooing them away from the places that they encamp, but helping them find a place to live and helping them get a job or helping them get into a school, right? All the tools are there, a bit rusty, a bit misused, maybe needing reformation, but on that note, I gotta say, kudos to California. The supposedly nefariously evil movie, conspiracy theory state, although I'm sure some horrible things are happening in and around various industries. There always is, with all kinds of industries. I'm not here to address that right now. I want to give kudos to the good things that do happen, right? California has been a leader, I think, in my humble opinion, in showing the rest of the states in this great, amazing, collection of states, this union of states, some of the things you can do quite efficiently and easily and quickly to facilitate the most vulnerable of people in your cities and towns. If you're not sure, you don't know what's going on, look into it. But Gavin Newsom and the state of California have recently, Gavin Newsom's pushed a lot, helped the state of California and the cities and whatnot, blah, 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 really get somewhere, I think, especially since the COVID-19 thing has hit. And unless they're bullshitting me, from what I've seen of the reporting, and I need to do, obviously, some more digging into it to get more details for you guys, but effectively, there's an ongoing program to acquire hotels and motels and like budget inns and buildings that do that sort of, we used to call them hostelry. That name sounds a bit hostile to me, to my ears, but places like inns, etc., budget motels and hotels, etc., to be leased out to the state of California and eventually maybe, I think if I remember correctly, acquired by the state of California for the purposes of providing temporary and into long-term housing, some of which is isolation housing for COVID-19 positive tested homelessness individuals, and some of it is just for homeless individuals that need a place to live and be able to shelter in place in some place that's better than a camping tent, right? As Stephen Colbert, whatever your personal opinion of him as an actor may be, publicly announced and reminded us and made it easy to make the meme of, his critique to the world of American Christians at all, regardless of flavor and variety, is if we're going to call ourselves a Christian nation, even though a big, huge number of people in this country are not, I technically don't qualify, according to many Christians, because of my weird, unusual patchwork of ideas that I've chosen to put together from various traditions. But if we're going to call ourselves a Christian nation because we have so many Christians and Christian churches, shouldn't we act like a nation of people who understand the teachings of Christ and understand that the teachings of Christ were not ideas to say, I believe in that, but rather practices to engage in? Might have even included yoga and definitely included meditation and prayer, because they are two sides of the same coin, those two things. And in the same chapter section where we get the Lord's Prayer, we also get this warning about serving God and Mammon, right? And I say Mammon is that dark entity of the dark energies, and that it is there and it has equivalent balanced powers to the light. And we can get into a deep discussion about the relationship between those two, but I posit you this, dear listeners. It is officially yin and yang. It is not yin either and or yang. Do you understand what I'm saying? It is the light and the dark. It is not the light or maybe the dark, and or slash the dark. And I've touched on this before, and I want to close with this thought. Despite the centuries of use of the following language, I don't believe that it's actually true. I do not believe that the light and the dark are at war with each other. I believe, conversely, that they are here to define and give rise to one another as co-creating, co-emergent, co-defining, mutually arising, dichotomously partnered entities or powers that are transcendent, not in a patent pending transcendent meditation association kind of way, but transcendent in the functional reality kind of way of the material realm, and functional, organic to it. Part of how this fractal unfolding membrane brings things about into reality. And if I may land on this final thought about it is my conclusion, if there's any struggle going on, it is the struggle to heal and reintegrate our personal aspects that are caught up in the darkness. In other words, if I were to correct historical phrasing, I would say to anybody who uses it, in my humble opinion, you don't kill your ego. You heal it and reintegrate it. And so, friends, we find ourselves in quite a wacky time, right? And I'm not listening to the current COVID-19 presentation in large part because listening to it every day has gotten a little bit intolerable and my brain has gotten a little mush. I made a meme that I have not posted, but I made it like not more than 4 days into the daily COVID-19 briefing ritual getting established. And I made it in the middle of, I think, one session that was at least 2.5, maybe 3 hours long, where he did some incoherent yet somehow tangibly sensible rambling about stuff that was resplendent with, in my detached assessment, neurolinguistic programming, plausibly deniable, like muddying the waters, us versus themist, kind of alarmist, but I'm just kidding, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It gives red meat to the base and riles up the left kind of commentary, and historical revisionist type stuff. And I made this meme about how, like, I'm just sitting here with my cup of coffee listening to an ongoing incoherent press conference where and realizing that I've gotten to a point where his whole shtick is incoherent ramble that somehow manages to sort of almost make sense, and that I'm burnt out on it. I never posted it because I thought it was a bit rude. But I think he's playing that game. And he's playing that game hard. But I also think there's evidence that indicates that this place as a nation state, a collection of little mini nation states really, a union of micro nation states, some of which are very large, was actually, in all earnestness, not quite prepared in the reality of it for the COVID-19. Thus, the episode that I made where it's like, enough theories, too many theories, not enough healing. And here's what my quick rundown of why I think if someone were to ask me in due time when we could finally go back to hanging out at bars and having robots safely drive us home so that DUIs are never to ever happen to anyone or be committed by anyone ever again, and I were to be out, having a social drink and enjoying the lost art of meeting strangers impromptu in a bar with, a meaningful handshake and non-tedious exchange of interesting, engaging, more than small talk conversation. And they asked me, like, what do you think, man? Was it all a hoax? Was it real? Was there a conspiracy? I'd be like, you know what? The Bible says that it's easier for a camel to walk through the thread of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into the gates of heaven. And that heaven is here and now. So here's what I think. No human endeavor ever achieves absolute success absolutely. And if you really think about the extremes to which most conspiracy theory content wants you to take it stretches credulity. Now, the counter argument is that that's something they rely on and that they want the sheeple to feel that way. But I counter with, has it never occurred to the conspiracy theory community that quite possibly the community itself, like most organized religions, is a systematically hijacked outlet for manipulative, neurolinguistically programmed, muddy the waters, cause confusion content that promises more than it will ever deliver. Because there's an old saying that if you watch the Hudsucker Proxy, you'll hear referenced a couple times. That gag has got whiskers on it. Okay? FEMA is coming to kill us all in butchering us death camps that will make World War III and Nazi Germany's Holocaust look like child's play, like a dress rehearsal. It's a frightening thought. And I don't want to be controversial here. And I don't know. I don't pretend to know anything 100% unless I've experienced it directly, right? So if I tell you I know or I feel very confident, there's something to it. And like I said, I could be wrong. But it makes the most sense to me, Occam's razor. It is more profitable and efficient to create a cornucopia, a cacophony, an overabundance of things to fear that would be really, really expensive to actually do than it is to actually do any one of them, never mind 3 or 4 of them. Okay? That's why, everything's a pain in the ass to do in normal world. And if you really just take a deep breath and look around, most people are earnest and sincere and doing their best. Now, whether you are the kind of person that judges most people as sheeple, whether you're the kind of person who's like offended that most people are judged as sheeple because you don't think you're a sheeple, but you also sort of feel there's a bunch of other dopey ass motherfuckers who don't know what's going on, or if you think I'm totally crazy, I humbly invite you to engage. Find me on Facebook. Let me know. The Almost Daily ZenCast has a Facebook page. So does The Incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Check them out. Check out other episodes I've recorded in the past. And let me know, and I'll talk about it on the air. But this is, right now, with not very many people submitting their opinion, an opinion show about my opinion. And here's what I think. I think the way the world's governments have reacted is evidence of human beings being flawed, imperfect, often corrupt by nefariously nebulous pulls, centers of gravity that are fueled by money and power and greed and the corruption inherent therein. But I don't think, as a robot from the future sent here to warn you about the robots from the future, I don't think it's robots just yet. I don't think this is a computer simulation. I think this is a living holographic fractal. And I don't think that the New World Order or the Illuminati or whoever you like has totalitarian control. Because, and I'm sure some, like, I just saw a documentary about an organization called The Family, right? Pretty scary, especially since it gets referenced by other conspiracy theory content as a nested entity that collaborates with and is part of the overall New World Order and the Illuminati, right? Whoever they are, and I mean no offense, and I'm not trying to offend them, bless their hearts, whoever they are, they're not robots from the future, because that hasn't happened yet. That's why I came back from the future, not technically your future, but the parallel universe, almost exactly like yours, but slightly different, because there's 3 of them that I have access to. Read the books. They're coming out soon. They're not lizard people, I don't think, because that's too Star Trek. It's too cartoony. I don't want to vote for that also, right? Remember, at the core of my thesis is whatever you obsess over, whatever you believe, you vote for. And the more people vote for that, the more the universe tries to make that plausibly possible. And whatever fails, fails, and only becomes like a perceptual projection reality and doesn't come physically manifest. But, we physically manifest things because we choose to physically manifest things through conscious intent the power of energy, and of course, actual physical action / otherwise known as labor. I digress, and I really need to wrap it up because it is 40 minutes and 40 seconds at the tone. And of course, friends, I'm always humbly thankful that you tune in and listen. Waiting for that tone because I called it way too early. 30. Right, so nothing in the universe is absolute. There's one thing I understand about the tone is that science can measure it, right? Why do I say that all of a sudden? Science can measure stuff, and it works consistently. And so, as I was saying to someone in person not too long ago, despite and almost in spite of something being quote-unquote dismissible as just a theory, if it works, it works. And if it measures something, it measures something. And based on my limited, but not too, somewhat, not too undereducated, for lack of good phrasing, in my humble but somewhat educated opinion, the most likely phenomena includes spiritual action, right? Spiritual agency. Because why? We've been warned about it for millennia, and it can be phenomenologically experienced. It operates in a place that transcends words. That's the problem. But it has the capacity to manifest into human action. And so I humbly encourage you, as I do every day, friends, to go find your Zen practice, whatever that is, to tune in to the energies of other people remotely by tuning into your own first, looking deep within, finding that stillness that all the divine beings from all the ancient religions at some point or another invited us to find deep within. Remember that old allegory? I forget where it comes from. It might be a Zen school. It might be some other tradition about it might be an indigenous peoples from America's thing, but some great spirit of ye olde ancient days wanted to hide the ultimate treasure somewhere where humans would be most challenged to find it not. And the divine entity, in its wisdom, examined some obvious and not so obvious places to hide it, sometimes as presented by other entities, sometimes in a sort of inner monologue to itself, and then decides, ultimately, to hide this ultimate gift deep within the human species itself. Because there, man is least likely, men and women are least likely to discover it. Through sheer brute force of the way we sort of absentmindedly live our existence. And doubly so because we at some point made the disastrous choice to abandon our attempt to fully live with a deep level of alignment and integration to that source deep within us. Otherwise known as when we toppled the Tower of Babel, which I've rambled about before, so I shan't now at this time. I humbly thank you, friends, and I invite you to tune in for more. After a brief break, reset, some hot tea, and a little bit of preparation, I'm actually going to jump on and do a teaser preview episode right here in the Streamflow profile page for the Almost Daily ZenCast of a special side project that has been slowly in development for quite some time. Not so much because it's heavily scripted or anything, but just because I haven't come around to figuring out how to actually do it and what sort of formula to use just yet. And it finally struck me. And I finally also have the time to do it. And I think today is going to be the day that I do it, this evening. And that's called Flights of Folly. I might change the name. I wanted it to cross over with the literary work that is very slow going. But I'm going to create, and for many of you, this might not be interesting at all. And I appreciate that. But I'm hoping it will interest many people who are already actively subscribed members of this massive multiplayer online video game. Because despite being a soul, spirit tribe person with lots of, soulful funk and deep philosophical attitude, my brain needs to veg out too after, many hours of meditation and do something fun and simple and rewarding, especially during these intense times of Trumptopian lockdown. But for those of you who are curious, the game is called EVE Online. It is a simple, straightforward, and surprisingly complex and deep and rich, designed to last for a very long time, space simulator MMO. And it's got a sort of challenging but easy to use interface once you get the hang of it. That's specific to the way the game works, and also has really, really, really strong social, tribal, corporate, guild culture ship. In other words, there's a lot of culture of corporate culture. There's a lot of in-game organizations known as corporations, but more generically in the gaming world as guilds, right? Or as, what's that other, this is the really popular term for it. I can't remember now, because I'm forgetful, and I need to break my throat hurts. But I digress. I belong to a really large in-game corporation alliance with lots and 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 lots of players, for whom I think this little mini-series spin-off will be interesting. So I'm going to do a teaser episode here in the Almost Daily ZenCast later this evening, just to make it easy to find, and hopefully attract some of them. Hello, EVE players from CDC and Sicko, which is the name of the corporate alliance. I didn't pick it, I didn't make it, but it is, by the way, for those of you who do not know, one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing corporate alliance in the game. So the little mini-series to promo and get the hell out of this show is going to be a Fundamentals 101 of mining in fleet formation tutorial, with some like mid-level and advanced professional tips for new players and veteran players just coming back to the game, needing a refresher, wanting to know what's up with the latest updates. And not a lot has changed, but some little things have been tweaked. And I don't know how things used to be, but I can tell you how they are now. And my own formulation that can be used by anybody, really, in the game, obviously, to mine with a group of fellow players in an efficient way and avoid getting picked on by other players in the game that might be dedicated to what is called suicide gank attacks, which sounds horrible but isn't as bad as it sounds. But for those of you who know, who are savvy, in EVE, that can be a thing. It's valid content. The whole game, and it's a massive game, spatially speaking, like in terms of how many different space miles you can fly. But yeah, so, and if the first, I'm gonna do like a pilot miniseries of like 3 episodes, and if that is successful and popular with the players in the corporate alliance that I belong to, I might make it an ongoing thing whenever I'm in the game, which has been something I talked about forever ago and I haven't fully executed yet. But now that I'm really adjusting to permanent lockdown, and it looks like it might be for who knows long, because there's right now as we speak, I'm sad I'm missing this out. The 3-phase plan is coming out. So to come full circle, I'll be back either later tonight or first thing early tomorrow to talk about that some more. And we've got to talk about Bernie dropping out of the primary race. And we got to talk about what is going on with the election, because holy shitballs. Right, folks? Okay. Namaste. Thank you for listening. I have been your eccentric, spirally, but not totally out of control, talk show opinion web podcast host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. And this has been another mashup, long, super mixed together multi-segment of Good Morning Trumptopia and the Almost Daily ZenCast, and a little bit of news breaking news. And a preliminary teaser for Flights of Fancy, the Eve MMO podcast, blah, blah, blah. I'm done talking. For now, thanks for tuning in.